Hello, and welcome to Real Cheating Story. How much pain and humiliation can a man take before he finally snaps? I guess if you asked 50 different men, you'd probably get 50 different answers. I pondered that as I considered the headstone of the man buried in the grave before me. I didn't know him well at all. In fact, I had spent only a few hours with him, but those few hours forever changed my life. 7 years ago, I was in KML on break from college. I had gone there with some of my buddies who promised great diving and partying. It was fun, and the diving was terrific. One night, however, I decided to spend a few quiet hours nursing a beer in one of the local bars. That's when he came up to my table. "Mind if I join you, young man?" he asked. He was an older man, appearing to be somewhere in his 60s, perhaps even a bit older. His eyes and general demeanor suggested he had experienced a great deal of pain and hurt. Something about him seemed somewhat familiar to me, and since I was feeling a bit mellow and charitable, I invited him to join me. A smile creased his face as he extended his hand. "I am Alan Jacobs," he said. I took his hand. "George Richardson." He sat down after we shook hands. "Yes, I know," he told me. "What the hell is going on here? How do you know who I am?" "Nothing sinister. I knew your dad. We served together in Vietnam a long time ago. In fact, he saved my life once, along with quite a few other Marines. He got the Medal of Honor, in fact." He took a worn photo out of his wallet and showed it to me. I had seen this photo before. A larger version of it hung in my dad's office when he was still alive. Alan pointed to some of the guys in the picture, all of whom wore military uniforms. "This was your dad. Here I am." We called this guy Spider because of his spindly frame. He may have looked small, but that boy could fight. He stopped and looked wistfully at the picture as though recalling memories of old comrades. "Unfortunately, they're all gone now except for me." He looked back up at me after a few quiet moments. "So, is there someone special in your life? A fiancé or something?" I shook my head. "Not at the moment. I am too focused on schoolwork right now, but I have been dating a few girls from time to time." He nodded approvingly. "Good for you. Trust me, the worst thing you can do right now is get tied down to one woman. Enjoy yourself, do what you need to do, then move on quickly. Trust me on that." "You sound a little bitter," I said. "Are you married?" He snorted. "Technically, I am, but it's a joke. It has been for years. I've given that woman the best years of my life, been faithful to her, adored and cherished her. And how does she repay me? By betraying me and humiliating me every chance she gets." Wow, I thought. This is one bitter dude. "Want to hear the story?" he asked. "What the hell?" I thought this could be interesting. "Sure." He told me the story of how he and his wife, Maggie, used to go scuba diving in Mexico and other places to relieve the stress of their jobs. He described how, despite being somewhat distant for years, his wife was a very beautiful woman. According to Alan, things went off the rails 2 years ago when they came down to KML. Apparently, there was some man from Spain who managed to work his way into their relationship, clearly looking to get involved with his wife. "Can you imagine that?" Alan said. "He told me he was going to pursue my wife, and I would just have to watch. Can you believe that?" He described the plans this man had laid out and how his wife seemed to follow through exactly as he had described. Damn it. It was as though they scripted it all out in advance. Here was my wife, the woman who had kept her distance from me, acting entirely differently than I had ever seen her before. He sighed. "Yeah, I should have stopped her, but I didn't. I thought she would shut him down just like she had with everyone else, including me. But no, she went through with it. What choice did I really have? It was made clear that if I didn't go along with it, he would be back to pursue her relentlessly. He told me that if I let it happen just this once, he would leave us alone afterward. But that didn't happen. They both tricked me. That was just the beginning. From then on, they proceeded to humiliate me whenever they could. I won't lie to you, son. At first, it was a bit exciting, even though it angered me. I thought that maybe she might eventually choose to end things with him and open herself up to me a bit. But it never happened, and the situation became exhausting quickly. Why don't you just end it? I asked. Kick her to the curb, divorce her, and be done with it. He sighed. 2 words, no-fault divorce. You know what that means? I shook my head. It means she gets nearly everything. The house, half of the savings, half of the retirement, and a large portion of my salary. She gets to live in the house I built, take half my money, and I'd still have to pay for her to live there while I struggle in a tiny apartment eating nothing but beans. I've talked to a bunch of attorneys, and that's how it is. At my age and in my condition, I'd never survive. What do you mean? I asked. A few months after all this started, I had a heart attack. It happened during one of their encounters that she insisted I watch. They wouldn't even stop long enough to call an ambulance. You know what she said? If he dies, he dies. We'll just take his insurance money and travel the world. Then they laughed. What kind of person does that? I finally managed to crawl to the phone and call 911. They didn't even stop when the paramedics came for me. And you know what else? She and her companion took off the whole time I was in the hospital. I have no idea where they went. Not once did she visit me or check to see if I was okay. I thought about getting revenge, maybe finding someone to date and make her watch. He shook his head. No, son, that wouldn't be right. I took a vow before God and everyone to remain faithful to her until death do us part. Those vows mean something to me, even if they don't to her. But that was a wake-up call for me. I decided there was no way she would get anything from me. I changed my will and took her out of it, and I changed my insurance beneficiary on my retirement, so she wouldn't get a penny. I decided to let go of that connection. Then about 4 months ago, I was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. The doctor said I had maybe 6 months to a year to live. That's when I decided to put an end to this, no matter the consequences. Tonight's the night I take back my dignity. I found all this hard to believe. I think he sensed my disbelief and pulled out his phone. I suspect you're thinking this can't be true. No one with a conscience would act like this, right? Maybe in the movies or on those fiction sites, but not in real life, he said. I had to agree. He punched a few things on his phone, took out a pair of earbuds, plugged them in, and handed me his phone. Watch this video, then tell me what you think. I put the earbuds on and hit play. I saw an attractive older woman with a man whose face was hidden. She seemed to be looking directly into the camera, but was actually addressing the man holding it. Your face says no, but I know you love watching this, don't you? She said, her smile lacking warmth. Don't worry, you're never touching my body again. Oh, that felt so good, she said, as she moved around, teasing him. What's the matter? You're not looking too good. Are you going to have another heart attack on us? Good. Maybe it will be the big one this time. That's okay. I'll play the part of the grieving widow to the hilt. I've been playing the part of the loving spouse all these years, so I'm pretty good at fooling people. Then we'll take your insurance money and travel to all the places you and I wanted to visit, she added, laughing. This time, the man beside her sat up and laughed with her, wrapping his arm around her. She turned to face him and said, Come on, let's do it again. Maybe we can get him to have a stroke this time. The video ended with the two laughing hysterically. I was in shock, staring at the blank screen in front of me. I have lots of other videos just like this, Alan told me. Why is she doing this? I asked. Did you cheat on her or mistreat her in some way? He shook his head. No, I never once cheated on her. I've always treated her like a queen. I did ask her once, though. He took the phone and pulled up another video. In the second video, Alan's wife sat with her back to him as he asked, Why are you doing this to us? I've never cheated on you, and you have to admit I treat you very well. I just want to know why you're tearing my heart out like this. She sighed and turned to face him, obviously annoyed by his questioning. You just don't do it for me anymore. I know you've never cheated on me, and yes, you treat me well. You're a great provider, but I just need someone else. Yours doesn't excite me anymore, and it hasn't for a long time. Just go along with it, and things will be fine. Maybe in a few years, I'll get tired of him, and we can look back on this and laugh about it when we're older. Just let me have this, okay? Absolutely not. I promise you this won't end well, Alan said in the video. Don't even think about getting a divorce, because I'll destroy you, she replied. I'll take everything you have, and I'll keep right on seeing him, and you'll be the one footing the bill. Got it? The video faded to black, leaving me dumbfounded. How could someone be so cruel? You have enough right here to destroy her, I said. He smiled. Now you're starting to get the idea. Yes, these videos could ruin her, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Tonight's just the beginning of her downfall, but I need help to make it happen. Will you help me, George? I was tempted but still needed one question answered. Why me? Surely you could get any number of people to help you. Alan nodded. You're right. The truth is, George, you're the closest thing to a son I have. My wife denied me children, claiming they would get in the way of her career. When I'm gone, that's it. My family tree ends here. No children, no survivors, nothing. I am it. He continued, let me ask you this. How many C students do you know who get $1 million scholarship to an Ivy League school? He had me there. I had been a bit lazy in high school, much to my parents' chagrin, and was surprised when I was awarded a huge scholarship from a private foundation supposedly set up to help the families of Vietnam veterans. It was unlike any scholarship I had ever heard of. Not only did it cover tuition, books, and lodging, but it also provided extra spending money for trips, a car, whatever I needed. After getting that scholarship, I promised my mother I'd focus on my studies, and so far, I have. Your father and I stayed in touch after the war. We talked, exchanged letters and emails. I met your mother a few times, and you and I have met as well, but you probably don't remember since you were just a baby when your dad was in the hospital. The last time I visited him, I promised I would take care of his wife and son. You see, his medical condition nearly wiped your family out financially, so I set up a private foundation that covered all his medical expenses. It also established $1 million trust for your mother and $1 million scholarship for you. I figured it was the least I could do for the man who saved my life in Vietnam. Lately, though, there are times I wish he'd let me die over there. So I'm asking you, George, will you help me do this? Will you help me reclaim some part of my dignity and my manhood? Tonight is the last anyone will ever see of me, so think of it as the last wish of a dying man. I want my life, as it is, to count for something. I thought hard about what he had just said. Isn't there some other way? I asked. You can take this to an attorney, sue her for mental cruelty, go after her job, I suggested. Alan shook his head. No, George, it's too late. I'm a dead man walking. In a month or so, I'll probably be in a hospital bed for the last time. And there's no way in hell I'm dying like that, a shriveled-up old man. And I'm not putting myself in a situation where she'll have any say over my final affairs. Are you sure your plan will work? I asked. He smiled. Oh yes. You see, I have the element of surprise. They're expecting a beaten-down, dejected old man. They'll have no idea the storm coming down on them. You're not going to harm her, are you? I asked, concerned. No. I want her to live a long time, and I want her to remember this night for the rest of her miserable life. She'll have a lot of explaining to do to a lot of people. What exactly would I have to do? I asked, hoping he wouldn't ask me to hurt anyone. Not much. Just record the encounter and send it out by email, then hand her an envelope, he said. That sounded simple enough. I already have the email drafted, so all you'd have to do is attach the video and hit send. He pulled 2 envelopes out of his pocket. This thick envelope is hers. It explains what you'll record tonight. The other one is for you. What's that one for? I asked. It contains a key to a safe deposit box, a card, and a letter with some instructions. After we finish tonight, you'll need to call my attorney. He's expecting your call and will explain it all to you. Okay, I'll do it, I said. What the hell? Make a video, send it out, and hand her an envelope. Simple enough. Alan smiled. Thank you, George. This means a lot to me. Call it my last great act of defiance. We finished our beers while watching part of a soccer game on the big screen television. Alan looked at his watch. It's time we head out. You ready? I indicated that I was, and we left the bar. I had no idea where we were going, so I followed his lead. He was mostly silent but offered a bit of advice. Someday, George, you're going to meet a woman and fall in love. I know I told you earlier to have fun and move on quickly, but the fact is, you will fall in love. It happens to us all. Just do yourself a favor before you marry her. What's that? I asked. Check her out closely. Observe her mother. Watch how she treats her husband. Because that's probably what you'll have to look forward to. But don't marry until she signs a prenuptial agreement. Protect yourself, and don't let your relationship get like mine. Always put her first and love her with everything you have. But take the initiative at the first sign of trouble, he said. That sounded like good advice to me. We finally arrived at what appeared to be our destination. There were two people waiting for Alan. The woman I saw in the video, sitting on an outdoor staircase, and a tall man next to her. Alan stopped and looked at me. This is it. Showtime. You have my phone, so please start recording as I approach them. Remember, some of what you're going to see could be disturbing, he said. Look, Alan, I began. I'm sorry about all of this. I barely know you, but I think you would have made a great dad. He smiled and put his hand on my shoulder. George, you're the spitting image of your dad, and I know he'd be damn proud of you right now. I remembered something my dad used to say sometimes. Alan, simply, he grinned. Aura, he said quietly before walking away. I plugged in the earbuds so I could hear what was being said and positioned his phone for a clear and stable video. I zoomed in a bit for a better view. The couple at the staircase reacted when they saw Alan approach. Neither of them noticed me. The man stood a bit taller and smirked as he began to speak. I wanted to knock that smirk right off his face. Well, looks like the cuck finally made it, he said, and the woman smiled in response. I was surprised at the clarity and quality of the sound. I'm here, Alan said. Let's get this over with. Not so fast, cuck, the smirking man replied, pulling out a bottle that appeared to be champagne and 3 flutes. He poured the sparkling liquid and handed one to the woman, who accepted it with a smile. He set a second glass down and offered the third to Alan. Let's drink a toast before we begin, shall we? After all, this is the 2nd anniversary of our relationship. Yes, it was 2 years ago today that I first had the pleasure of being with your wife right here on these very steps, wasn't it? Alan wasn't amused. He kept his hands at his sides and said nothing. Oh, come now, Alan, the woman said. Don't be a stick in the mud. This is a special day for us all, isn't it? Don't you want to celebrate with us? Maybe even have a little reenactment? I'm wearing the same dress I wore that first night. Don't you like it? She lifted the hem of her dress playfully. We'll enjoy a little toast. Then you can watch him have his way with me just like we did that first night. Afterwards, you can sit back and watch us the rest of the night. It'll be so much fun. Alan reached behind his back and pulled out a gun he had hidden in his belt. He took a solid shooting stance, holding the pistol with both hands, just like my dad had taught me so many years ago. The smirk vanished from the other man's face as he realized the pistol was aimed at his head. Well, it looks like Cuck Boy has finally grown a set of balls. What are you going to do, Cuck? Are you going to shoot me? He laughed, and the woman joined him. This ends now, Alan said with conviction. And yes, I am going to blow your brains out. Well then, I guess I had better prepare to meet my maker, the man said sarcastically, spreading his arms wide. Shut the hell up and don't move. Alan shouted, cocking the pistol. The man's expression shifted as he realized Alan was serious. The woman's tone changed as well. Alan, please don't do anything stupid, she said. Look, you don't have to watch us. Just go away, and we'll celebrate without you. It won't be as much fun without you here for us to humiliate. Shut up. I'll deal with you next. Her eyes widened in shock. Alan had never spoken to her like this before. Alan, look, we don't have to resort to violence. This isn't necessary. You're not going to shoot me or anyone else, and you know it. Please, put the gun down and let's discuss this like mature adults, the smirking man said, clearly nervous. Oh, so it's please now, is it? Alan said. You see, that's the problem with people like you. You think you can just waltz in, steal someone's wife, strip the man of his dignity, and then expect the injured party to discuss it calmly. You mistake patience for weakness, and you get cocky and overconfident. Well, guess what? Tonight, you're going to pay the piper. You screwed my wife, stole my dignity, and my manhood. Tonight, I'm taking it back. Please, Alan, I'm begging you. Put the gun down, and we can end this, the man pleaded. Would you get on your knees and beg for your life? Alan asked. Slowly, the man got down on his knees, hands in the air. Please, Alan, I'm begging you. Don't kill me. We can put this to an end right now, and you'll never see me again. Alan addressed his wife. Look at that, Maggie. Your lover is now on his knees, begging for his life. What do you think now? Not so cocky, are you? He turned to the man. What do you think, Mags? Should I let him live? No, I don't think so. Goodbye, a-hole, Alan said as he pulled the trigger. The man's eyes widened, but he had no time to respond as the bullet struck him directly in the forehead and exited out the back. He fell backward, a pool of blood soaking the ground. Maggie screamed and covered her ears. Alan shifted his aim toward her. Shut up. Just shut up. She stopped screaming, but tears began to stream down her face, running her makeup. You murdered him, she yelled. Yes, I did. But you and your lover murdered me 2 years ago, and you've been driving a stake through my heart every day since then. So I guess that makes us even. Now it's your turn to feel pain. Please, Alan, don't kill me, she sobbed. I'm sorry I hurt you like that. Really, I am. No, Mags, you're not sorry at all, Alan said, a twisted smile forming on his face. And don't worry, I'm not going to kill you. He paused, the smile lingering. Not that I haven't thought about it. Oh yes, I considered it 100 times, and I could have done it too. But I figured that would be too good for you. I want you to live to be 100, and I want every day to be a reminder of what you did. That's right, you are directly responsible for the deaths of 2 men. One being your lover, and the other being the man who loved you exclusively for 17 years. By the way, Mags, I'm dying. Months ago, I was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor and given 6 months to a year to live. But I decided to take charge of my own fate, and before you celebrate my death, I want you to know that I changed my will and all my retirement accounts after my heart attack. You're getting nothing. Zero. Zilch. Nada. After I'm done here, there will be a nice young man giving you something that explains it all. Can't we talk this out? She asked, desperation in her voice. No, Mags. I tried talking to you for the last 2 years. You made it clear how you felt about me. Now you're going to pay the price. Hell, you probably didn't even notice that I haven't worn my wedding ring for the last few months, have you? Yeah, I know you spent $2,000 on that ring. I got $20 for it at the pawn shop. Maybe if you're quick, you can get it out of hock before they sell it. You did what? That was a special ring. I had it made just for you. About that, you didn't seem to care about it the last 10 years, did you? You sure as hell didn't care the last 2 years. In fact, I don't even remember you once telling me that you loved me in recent years. You made it clear I just didn't do it for you anymore. I could have accepted a divorce, but no, you had to hurt and humiliate me every chance you got. Please, Alan, let's get some help, maybe some counseling. Don't do this, she begged. Now you care? Now that I'm really dying? No, Mags. It's too late. I warned you this wouldn't end well, but you wouldn't listen. Oh, and by the way, you might want to prepare yourself for a flood of calls after I'm done. You see, this is all being recorded and will be sent by email to everyone you know. Your friends, family, everyone you work with, even a bunch of media contacts. No, please, she cried. Let's start over. Please, I've learned my lesson. Too little, too late, Mags. Goodbye. With that, Alan put the gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. Maggie screamed hysterically. No, please, Alan. Don't die. Please come back to me. Alan, please. I'm sorry. I really am. Alan, please. I didn't mean it. I really do love you. I stopped the video, saved it, then pulled up the email draft, attached it, and hit send. I waited until I saw the notification that the email had been sent, then turned the phone off. I walked over to the hysterical woman, who looked up at me through her tears. I pulled out the envelope marked Mags and handed it to her. Who are you? She asked through her sobs. From what Alan says, I'm the closest thing to a son he ever had. Too bad. I think he would have made a great dad. Good luck. I heard the sound of sirens and left as quickly as I could. I may have seemed calm on the outside, but I was shaking for quite some time. After all, I had just witnessed one man's murder and another man's suicide in the most violent way imaginable. It took me some time to compose myself enough to make a couple of calls. The first was to my buddies, telling them I had to leave early in the morning. They took it well but asked if I was all right. I promised to tell them about it sometime. The next call was to the attorney whose number was on the card in the envelope Alan gave me. I identified myself, and we spoke for a few minutes. He told me to come see him at his DC office in the next day or two, then gave me directions to the bank that held the safe deposit box where I was to store Alan's phone. He then told me to turn on the news. I did, and saw a shortened, edited version of the video I sent out. Apparently, the suicide of a prominent member of the Washington political class was considered newsworthy. Attempts to reach the widow of Alan Jacobs have so far been unsuccessful, the announcer said. According to videos sent to a number of media outlets, tonight's incident is the result of what appears to be an ongoing love affair she allegedly had with a foreign diplomat. It's not known exactly how Jacobs sent the video of his own suicide, but it's generally believed he had helped doing so. The State Department has not released a statement on the murder of the foreign diplomat. Stay tuned for updates. I flipped through the news channels to see my video everywhere. I fired up my laptop and found that reports on Alan's suicide had gone viral. Reports stated there were 3 videos, but parts of only one were considered safe for network use. At least one of the other 2 videos, the article stated, was graphic in nature and showed Mrs. Jacobs in intimate situations with the foreign diplomat. The next day, I returned to the States and made my way to the attorney I had spoken to earlier. He informed me that Alan had changed his will some time ago, making me the sole beneficiary of his entire estate, except for his house, which he had given to a non-profit group so it could be turned into a shelter for homeless veterans. After taxes and fees, I would receive about $10 million. A few days later, I attended Alan's funeral at Arlington National Cemetery. Mrs. Jacobs was there as well, playing the role of the grieving widow, but no one paid her any attention. She sobbed as a Marine in dress blues handed her the flag that was draped over his coffin. The reading of Alan's will went about the same. She tried contesting it, but withdrew her objection after Alan's attorney suggested that some of the more scandalous videos of her with her lover would be used against her and thus become public record. After the meeting, she came over to me. "I hope you're happy," she said. "I lost everything. I couldn't believe my ears." "You didn't lose anything," I told her. "You threw it away. To be precise, you deliberately threw it away. Now you're getting what you deserve." I left her standing there and went back to school, where I became more determined than ever to do my best. I wanted to be the kind of man that would make both Alan and my dad proud. At the same time, I kept a loose tab on Maggie Jacobs and caught an interview with her on one of those daytime talk shows for women. She tried to play the victim, claiming abuse and infidelity, and 3 of the co-hosts went along with her. But one of the hosts had apparently seen all 3 videos and began to confront her politely with her own words. Maggie denied ever saying what the host recalled, but then the host played the video where she admitted that Alan had never abused her or cheated on her. "Isn't it true that you refused to call 911 when your husband was having a heart attack?" the host asked. "From what I understand, you and your lover kept right on going even as your husband was dying. How do you respond to that?" Naturally, this pretty much ended the interview, and Maggie left the set in tears, confronted by her own words and actions. To my knowledge, she never appeared on any other program. Then an article appeared a few months later stating that she was found dead in her apartment, the apparent victim of suicide. According to the report, she had been placed on paid administrative leave following Alan's suicide. The man she was involved with turned out to be more than just a foreign diplomat. Several intelligence operatives had apparently connected him to terrorist outfits, and there were those who believed Maggie had passed on sensitive information. Unable to deal with the consequences of her actions, she took an overdose of pills followed by a significant amount of alcohol. Officers who discovered her body said she was wearing her wedding dress and was holding her wedding photo. A note on her nightstand simply read, "Please forgive me. I followed Alan's advice where women were concerned. I dated quite a few, did what I set out to do, and moved on. I fell in love a time or 2 but changed my mind after meeting their parents. Then I met Karen. We dated for a long time, and I found myself falling in love with her. She invited me to meet her parents over the holiday, and I was struck by the way they interacted with each other. Although married for 30 years, they acted like teenagers, constantly sneaking hugs and kisses. It was obvious they truly loved one another. More than once, Karen jokingly suggested they get a room. "How do you think you got here?" her mom said, laughing. By the end of the trip, my mind was made up. Her father spoke to me privately before we left. "You seem like a really nice guy, George, and I see how my daughter looks at you. Tell me the truth. Do you love her? I mean, really love her, he asked. Yes, sir, I do, I told him. It was true. I loved Karen very much. Do you love her enough to spend the rest of your life with her? He asked. That was the $64,000 question. I believe I do, I told him. Good, because if you ever hurt my little girl, you'll have us to answer to. I considered what he said and carefully formulated my response. I realized he was only looking out for his daughter, and I respected that. Sir, I know firsthand what can happen when a marriage breaks down. I've personally seen the pain it can cause, and I swear to you that I would never do anything to hurt her. Someday I'll tell you my story, and I hope you'll understand. I'm not sure if it was the expression on my face or the tears struggling to escape my eyes, but he seemed to stand and shook his head. Okay, George, that's good enough for now, and I am going to hold you to that. Karen and I married after I graduated law school, at her father's insistence. We signed a prenuptial agreement to protect both our assets. In addition to my $10 million, Karen had inherited a large sum of money from her grandparents, and we all agreed it was for the best. She and her parents seemed confused when I told them of my plan to join the Marines and become a JAG officer, a military attorney. They had assumed I would be accepting a high-paying job with one of the many prominent law firms that tried to recruit me. That's when I told them about my dad and Alan. Oh my God, that's so sad, Karen said. I played them the video I took that night in KML. Although Alan's phone was still in storage, I was one of the 1,000-plus recipients of the email sent out that night. You were the one who took that video? She asked, surprised. I wondered how he got that video to the media so fast. Didn't anyone ever question you? No, I guess the authorities figured it didn't really matter. And now, with Mrs. Jacobs dead, the case is closed. I've got lots of video that he took, but it's not something for the squeamish. I looked at Karen's father. Now you know why I'll never do anything to hurt your little girl. I assure you that if there are any problems, I'll take the initiative and get them fixed before they get out of hand. He understood, giving me a manly hug. I believe you, son. Thanks for sharing that with us. It had to be painful to witness. About a year later, Karen gave birth to a boy. She asked me what I would like to name him, and I said, Michael Allen Richardson, after the two bravest men I've ever known. Michael was my father's first name, and you already know who Allen is. Michael Allen, she said. I like it. Michael Allen it is. And here we are at Arlington National Cemetery, in front of Allen's grave. I know there are some who, upon hearing this story, will think Allen was a coward for putting up with so much for so long. I know there are those who question why he endured the humiliation as long as he did. I'm one of them. Maybe he was a bit hesitant for a time. Perhaps he thought the love they once had would win out in the end. Who knows? Maybe he thought she would come to her senses after a while. I chose not to judge the man since I wasn't there. What I do know for a fact is what I witnessed that day in KML. That was certainly not the act of a coward. I pulled a small eagle, globe, and anchor out of my uniform pocket and placed it on his headstone. Rest in peace, Alan, I quietly said. Story 2. Someone's mistake can shed light on many things that you didn't even know about before. My wife cheated on me with her boss, but I found out about it in an extremely unusual way. Namely, when I was taken to the police station and suspected of a serious crime. It was an extremely difficult but very instructive period in my life. Tony Catalano may not have been the brightest individual, but his loyalty and dedication were unquestionable. Over the years, Mr. B had recognized his commitment by assigning him increasingly important tasks. Now faced with his most significant assignment yet, Big Tony was determined to validate Mr. B's trust in him. Studying the photograph of his target once more, he took note of the black Cadillac Escalade nestled in the poorly lit parking garage. Tony was aware that Arthur Clark owed the boss a substantial sum for assistance rendered in a business transaction. His mission was to remind Clark, the CEO of a prominent insurance company, of the repercussions of his late payment. Give him the Big Tony growl and, if necessary, imply physical harm but refrain from any violent actions. These corporate types are typically weak-kneed, and hell likely resort to pleading once confronted. Ensure he contacts me first thing tomorrow to address his delayed payment, Mr. B had instructed Tony. Big Tony had conducted some research on Arthur Clark. He was aware that Clark was a well-presented, attractive man who took care of himself, sporting wavy brown hair and deep brown eyes. Clark drove a 2022 Escalade and typically lingered as the last executive in the building, implying that they would be alone in the parking garage. The second-to-last executive had departed just 10 minutes earlier. Tony observed attentively from behind a column support as the garage door opened. He couldn't help but be impressed by Clark. The man appeared approximately a decade younger than his photograph as he made his way to his car. Tony, standing at 64 and weighing 255 pounds, approached the other man, closing in as he reached his vehicle. "Mr. B is displeased. You're overdue on your payment," Tony snarled at the man, who stared back at him with a puzzled expression. "Who? I don't know anyone named Mr. B," the man stammered, his eyes widening. Tony growled once more, withdrawing a pistol from his waistband. "Nice attempt, but if you don't want to spend the rest of your life limping..." On a balmy day, Tony perspired profusely, his grip on the gun slipping due to sweat. In a panicked moment, he accidentally discharged the weapon while readjusting his hold. The resulting gunshot reverberated loudly within the confines of the garage. Horror gripped Tony when he saw the red liquid gushing out of the man amid the screams, causing him to faint. Although Tony was still alive, he doubted the man's chances of survival as the blood continued to flow. This unforeseen event was not part of Tony's plans, and quick thinking was not his strong suit. With no apparent escape route, Tony, under immense pressure, recalled a line from a pirate movie, "Dead men tell no tales." Given the circumstances, it seemed apparent. He fired another shot, ending Clark's life before departing. Tony anticipated Mr. B.'s displeasure at this mistake. Unaware of car models, he failed to notice the Escalade model year difference as he left the garage. Meanwhile, Gary Finchel lay dying, his phone ringing repeatedly before eventually diverting to voicemail. 10 minutes later, it rang again. On a bustling Friday at the dental practice of Dr. Alan Siegel and Dr. Victor Washington, two individuals who quickly identified themselves as police officers approached the receptionist and inquired about Dr. Washington. 10 minutes later, a bewildered and flushed Dr. Washington found himself being escorted out in handcuffs. Victor Washington waited until his attorney arrived at the police station before consenting to an interview. "As I mentioned to you earlier, I had minimal acquaintance with Gary Finchel. He was employed at the same company as my wife. I encountered him occasionally at her workplace gatherings, such as Christmas parties and 4th of July barbecues. I doubt I exchanged more than 100 words with the man since Tracy started working there 4 years ago," Victor stated sharply. "What the hell is happening?" He added. "You're aware that Mr. Finchel was murdered the other night, correct?" queried the male officer. "Yes. Tracy seemed quite distressed when she learned about it yesterday. I believe she left work early. She might be at home again today," Victor replied. The two officers exchanged glances, sharing a smile. Victor and his attorney noted the exchange. "Where is this leading?" inquired Victor's attorney. "A man loses his life, and you don't expect us to overlook his lover's cuckold, do you?" remarked the female officer. Victor Washington was on the verge of falling out of his chair. What? He exclaimed. "Betrayal? My wife, another man? You're saying you had no idea your wife was cheating with Gary Finchel, and you didn't take revenge? And am the Easter Bunny, and she's the Tooth Fairy," remarked the male officer. "You've already confessed you lack an alibi for the time of the murder, and you clearly had a motive." Victor slouched in his seat, his lawyer murmuring in his ear. "No, honestly, I had no clue," Victor stated quietly. He gazed vacantly at the two officers. "I didn't know," he directed at them. "How did you guys find out?" The officers exchanged glances but remained silent. "You shot him, Dr. Washington." "We understand," the male officer said. "How did you discover my wife's affair with Finchel?" The dentist asked once more. "Your wife left 2 messages on his cell phone about meeting him around the time of the crime. She confessed when we pressed her," the officer explained. As Victor lay on his jail cot that night, he had ample time to contemplate his predicament. The police hadn't charged him yet, but they had 48 hours before they were obliged to release him. Despite being a clever man, Victor found himself more preoccupied with the news of his wife's infidelity than with the looming possibility of being charged with murder. He and Tracy had shared a 26-year-long marriage and raised 2 adult children together. Up until just a few hours ago, Victor had believed their bond was unbreakable. Now he was consumed by questions. How long had the affair been going on? What prompted it? How could he have missed the signs? On Sunday evening, Victor found himself formally accused of murder and was deemed a flight risk, resulting in the denial of bail. He couldn't help but notice that his wife hadn't attempted to contact him since his arrest. Did she too suspect him of killing her lover? Victor reminisced about Wednesday evening. For nearly a year now, it had become routine for Tracy to go out for dinner and chat with her close friend Laura. Victor had never questioned it much before. He trusted his wife. When she returned home around 8 o'clock, however, she seemed unusually tense and didn't hesitate to express it. "I didn't see any dishes in the sink. Please tell me you didn't just have Pop-Tarts for dinner again. Honestly, Vic, you're perfectly capable of cooking. I know you can," she complained. "Maybe I just don't feel like cooking when I'm alone. I miss you, darling. I'm not a fan of these girls' night-out outings." "Oh, come on," she retorted before storming off to the shower. Tracy's frustration with her husband grew as her relationship with Gary Finchel continued, though Victor only recently became aware of the issue in their marriage. Tracy, deeply devoted to her husband, hadn't sought an affair. When her friendship with her boss Finchel began to deepen over the years of working closely together, Finchel began to see potential for more. As Tracy confided in him about her personal life, Tracy, standing at 55 and weighing 120 pounds with a curvy figure and shoulder-length straight black hair, appeared much younger than her 48 years. But she became increasingly anxious about approaching her 50th birthday. Gary gradually boosted her confidence with compliments, despite her husband also praising her. Yet Tracy seemed particularly gratified by the attention from another man. Finchel, who was married and had 2 children of his own, courted Tracy's affection with careful patience, and it took him almost a year before putting another man's woman to bed. Despite her smaller stature compared to her husband, Tracy found Finchel a more skilled lover, ignoring the novelty factor that added to her pleasure. The illicit nature of the affair strengthened their bond. Tracy and her lover usually met for bed meetings once or twice a week. They also often met for lunch and spent a lot of time together in the office. Their affair was a top secret, and even Arthur C. Clarke knew about it. Victor had his lawyer handle the financial investigation on Monday morning due to his dwindling trust in his wife. That same morning, his children visited him while he was in custody and informed him about the sensationalized coverage in the tabloids regarding his predicament. One of the headlines posted by his son, Jared, crudely referred to the deceased's shot masculinity. "Well, I have to give credit to the headline writer for being cunning, at least," Victor remarked quietly. "That's not funny, Dad. You're in serious trouble here, and you're making jokes," complained his daughter Dee. "I'm sure everything will resolve itself, sweetheart. I didn't commit the crime, I swear," Victor assured his children. "Mom certainly seems convinced otherwise. We stayed at the house last night, and she spent most of the time with us calling you a murderer. She claimed you couldn't handle her new man being a superior person, a better lover," Jared recounted. "I eventually told her to stop talking nonsense." Jared flashed a sheepish grin at his father. In typical situations, he understood that Victor wouldn't condone his son using harsh language towards his wife, but this was far from typical. Victor returned the grin, prompting Jared to breathe a sigh of relief. "I'm grateful for your support," Victor acknowledged. "When did you learn about Mom?" his daughter inquired. "Not until they arrested me. I keep telling the cops that I had no idea," Victor replied. "I cared about your mother, but I won't end up in jail just because she's turned promiscuous. I'd like to know who eliminated that jerk, though." I'd happily shake their hand. The children exchanged looks of utter surprise. They had always known their father to be nothing but truthful with them. Similarly, they had never known their mother to be deceitful with them either. But it was undeniable now that she had been dishonest with both their father and them. She attempted to justify her infidelity by consistently blaming their father for Finchel's murder. She repeatedly insisted to anyone who would listen that the media was unfairly targeting her for a minor indiscretion while giving her husband a pass for the murder. "Yes, I had an affair, but your father took a man's life. The damn press only cares about the sexual aspect," she lamented to her children. Well, if Dad committed murder, it's only because you had a sexual relationship with this man. It's all about intimacy, Jared retorted. The state authorities became immediately suspicious upon discovering a 9mm pistol alongside the decomposed remains of a large man in a rural area several months later. 2 days later, ballistics analysis on the firearm revealed a connection to a high-profile case from the previous spring, famously known as the jilted husband case. Such incidents, where a betrayed husband resorts to violence against his wife's lover, were uncommon. The deceased was identified as Tony Big Tony Catalano, a minor member of the mafia associated with George B.'s organization. Despite thorough investigation by both state and local law enforcement, no apparent link between Catalano and the individual imprisoned for the murder of Gary Finchel, Dr. Victor Washington, could be established. The resurgence of interest in the jilted husband case reignited media attention, prompting collaboration between journalists and law enforcement to uncover any connection between the mafia and the insurance company. Eventually, the police succeeded in identifying Arthur Clark as the missing link, though it took a vigilant video technician at a local news station to piece together the entire puzzle. Rob Compto from KRNT News was examining photos of the key figures in both cases when he noticed the striking physical resemblance between Gary Finchel and his boss, Clark. It occurred to him that both men drove black Escalades, although Finchel was 2 years older. What if Big Tony mistakenly shot Finchel, thinking he was targeting Clark? Compto proposed during an unofficial meeting with the two investigating officers. Could it be that Finchel losing his, manhood was just an odd coincidence? Further inquiry prompted the police to consider the video technician's hypothesis. Several employees from the insurance company pointed out that Finchel's meticulous grooming and car preference seemed like obvious attempts to curry favor with his boss. George Burrell wasn't pleased with Big Tony when he reported that his assignment had gone wrong, resulting in Clark's death that night. The mafia boss always struggled to control his notorious bad temper, but in his line of work, it wasn't always feasible. I explicitly told you not to shoot, you bloody idiot. What part of no shooting didn't you understand? Burrell roared at the trembling man. You shot him twice and killed him. I messed up big time, Mr. B. I'm really, really sorry, Tony said apologetically. The gun started slipping out of my hand. I tried to readjust my grip, and it went off. He was bleeding heavily, and I knew he wouldn't make it. I thought he might spill if I just left him there. So I put him out. Burrell pondered for a moment before responding. Have Andrew take you to our place on East 9th and watch over you for a few days until we can arrange for you to leave town for a while. He'll keep you hidden and well-fed. Thank you, Mr. B. I really appreciate this. I'm truly sorry about what happened. All right, get going, Tony, Burrell said as he patted the large man on the shoulder and guided him toward the door. Tony's destiny was decided when it was discovered that the person who died was not Arthur Clark, but one of his staff members. Clark had left the office earlier that day for a medical appointment. This might not be the most undesirable outcome, Burrell remarked to his chief aide, Frankie Donatel. It will certainly demonstrate to Mr. Clark that we are not to be underestimated. But damn, I always had a soft spot for Tony, that lovable naive guy. Understand what needs to be taken care of. Donatel acknowledged with a nod and exited the room. Trace's life took a nosedive following Finchel's death. Unaware that her husband had any knowledge of her affair, she was utterly shocked by his violent act against another man. Suddenly gripped by genuine fear, she found solace in the fact that the police had apprehended him and he was being detained without bail. Despite her children's dismay over her affair, Tracy attempted to divert attention from her infidelity by emphasizing the sensational aspect of her lover's murder by her husband. However, this tactic was undermined by the media, who sensationalized the story of a betrayed husband taking lethal action. I swear, you'd think I'm the first woman in the city to ever stray from her marriage, Tracy complained to her colleague Liz during a lunch break about 2 weeks after the incident. According to the damn press, impractically synonymous with infidelity. Well, it's not every day your jealous husband shoots your lover and kills him, Liz remarked with a nervous laugh. Noticing Trace's expression, she quickly murmured, Sorry, Tracy. Pretty much everyone here knew you and Gary were involved romantically, but how deep were your feelings for each other? Tracy, were you two in love? I did care for Vic, But Gary and I were developing something more serious. It's just a shame we'll never get to see where it could have led. I can't fathom Victor being capable of murder. It's true what they say. You never truly know someone, huh? Tracy remarked. I suppose not, Liz replied softly. Liz had been present with Tracy and a few other colleagues at Gary's funeral the week prior. She observed Gary's wife casting hostile looks towards Tracy multiple times. Tracy seemed to keep her gaze low, though tears were evident throughout the service. Liz sensed Tracy's apprehension about Gary's widow potentially causing a scene. Thankfully, nothing untoward occurred. Tracy made a point of staying in the background, avoiding any confrontation with the widow. Having never experienced incarceration before, Victor was overwhelmed by the sensation of freedom upon being released after over 4 months in jail. To him, it felt akin to experiencing the most intense pleasure of his life. Wow, Lance, the air feels so much fresher. I can't believe it, he exclaimed with joy as he exited the jail alongside his attorney. The city's district attorney dropped the charges against Victor when the police discovered that another man, Big Tony Catalano, was responsible for the murder of Gary Finchel, his wife's lover. Lance Weatherman drove Victor to the home he had shared with his wife Tracy for the past 15 years. Tracy was still at work, it being just past noon. Stepping into the house, Victor couldn't help but notice that everything looked exactly as he remembered it. As Lance observed, Victor slowly explored the entire house, running his hands over the walls, furniture, and knickknacks as if he were blind. I've missed this place so much, even with everything that's happened, Victor murmured. Victor approached his well-stocked liquor cabinet. Aware that Tracy abstained from hard alcohol, it likely remained untouched since his arrest. The cabinet boasted at least 25 bottles of various spirits. Ah, a moment for celebration demands a single malt, Victor declared, retrieving a partially filled bottle of Glenmorangie 12-year-old and pouring shots for himself and Lance. Thank you for your support, Lance, and for sticking by me during the toughest times, he expressed. I know this meant more than just a paycheck. They both sipped their shots quietly, Lance tapping his fingers on the manila folder resting on the table. Why do you think Tracy didn't divorce me while I was in jail? Victor inquired. Initially, perhaps due to the chaos surrounding the situation, especially with all the media frenzy. Later, she might have assumed you'd take care of it from prison, Lance speculated. The kids mentioned she was convinced I murdered her lover and harbored resentment, so it's surprising she hasn't initiated it yet, Victor mused. She'll be in for quite a shock when she returns. Maybe amidst all this, she's had a change of heart and wants to reconcile. Gary's gone. The kids are angry with her. She's practically become a real-life Cruella de Vil. What's the saying? Making the best out of a bad situation? Lance suggested. Upon arriving home, Tracy was taken aback by the unfamiliar car parked in her driveway. Initially mistaking it for another reporter seeking a quote, she soon realized that the occupant had already made their way into her home. Hastily dialing 911, she provided the dispatcher with all pertinent details. Within moments, 2 uniformed police officers entered the Washington residence, accompanied by Tracy. Oh my God, what are you doing here? She exclaimed upon seeing Victor. As the officers brandished their weapons, both Victor and Lance raised their hands in surrender. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I live here. In Vic, Washington. I was just released from jail a few hours ago. Even got the DA to apologize to me, Victor explained. True. I'm his attorney. They dropped all charges, added Lance. One of the police officers phoned in to confirm the statement, leaving Tracy stunned. He was just another pawn in a pathetic tale of misfortune, Tracy, Victor remarked. He happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Besides, why would I ever risk going to jail for someone like you? You overestimate yourself. Tracy's face flushed with embarrassment as she lowered her head. As the 2 officers prepared to depart, Lance requested their presence to witness something. Handing Tracy a manila envelope, he informed her that she had been served. I'm not certain about wanting a divorce, Vic, Tracy murmured. I truly believed you were responsible for Gary's death, but since you weren't, perhaps there's still a chance for us. Are you completely delusional, woman? You betrayed me. Forget everything else. Forget that your infidelity landed me in jail for over 4 months, Victor yelled. You praised him to the kids, claimed he was a better man, a better lover. Well, I refused to settle for Gary Finchell's leftovers. Vic found himself uncertain about how he could adequately express his gratitude to Alan Siegel, his business partner, and Alan's wife, Marilyn, for the unwavering support they extended to him throughout his wrongful imprisonment and divorce. The Siegels made regular visits to Victor in jail, ensuring he wasn't alone, and Alan went above and beyond, working 50 to 60-hour weeks to manage Victor's workload in his absence. After taking a week off to readjust to his life, Victor returned to work, astonished by the kindness and support he received from people around him. Many went out of their way to offer words of encouragement, and some even took the initiative to share their contact information with him on slips of paper. Despite feeling embarrassed, Victor accepted these gestures, not wanting to offend anyone. It dawned on him the profound impact of the press and social media, as his children, Alan, and Marilyn all highlighted how sympathetic portrayals in the media contrasted sharply with the negative light cast upon his ex-wife, Tracy, and her partner, Gary. In the upscale restaurant where they were seated, Marilyn Siegel reached out for Victor's hand, expressing her concern. "What's happening, Vic? It's been 2 years. Your mind seems focused, but your heart isn't in it," she said. Victor met Marilyn's gaze, recognizing her and Alan as his pillars of support in recent years, alongside his daughter, Dee. Marilyn especially had taken a personal interest in Victor's well-being, often watching over him like a mother hen. With unwavering patience, she awaited his response, prompting him to reconsider any flippant replies. "Things aren't the same anymore, Em. I can engage with women. I can even have physical relationships, but there's a void. There's no real connection. I understand that sex can exist without love, but that's not what I'm after," Vic admitted. "Vic, you're not going to find that connection on the first, second, or third date. Remember how you fell for Tracy? It took time. You got to know each other. Love didn't happen overnight. You're rushing it, expecting the one to miraculously appear. You go out a couple of times, then move on. It doesn't work like that," Marilyn reasoned. "But I'm 52, not 22, March. I don't have the luxury of time. Time for love," Marilyn cut in. "Come on, Vic, aging doesn't make time move faster, and if it's meant to be, that's fine. But you have to give it a chance first." Marilyn let out an annoyed sigh before casting a sidelong glance at her friend. Unbeknownst to her, she was perhaps the only person Victor would pay attention to. By chance, Marilyn and Alan began hosting intimate gatherings at their house every few months, always ensuring there were several single women present, including Victor. Victor wasn't oblivious to Marilyn's intentions, and he remarked to Alan about Marilyn's discerning taste in women. "You better be on your best behavior, buddy, because if she ever dumps you, she's got a whole lineup of beautiful women to choose from," Victor warned. "I've noticed that," Alan replied as he reached up to ignite one of the 4 citronella torches lining the edges of the Seagull's spacious deck. Victor caught sight of her. In reality, he noticed her figure in those snug jeans and the expanse of smooth skin revealed by her raised top as she reached. When she turned around, he stood there silently, a faint smile playing on his lips until he realized she was looking directly at him. Was all he managed to utter, his embarrassed mind unable to form coherent thoughts. The woman standing before him appeared to be no taller than 5 feet and weighing no more than 100 pounds. Victor observed, however, he couldn't help but notice that a significant portion of that weight seemed to be concentrated in her chest. As her arms rested at her sides, he could discern about 3 inches of well-defined core muscles beneath her prominent breasts. "I get that a lot," she asserted confidently. "Pardon?" Vic's mind finally caught up with his ears as he glanced at the woman's face for the first time, realizing she was Asian American with large eyes and straight black hair falling to her shoulders. She noticed the recognition dawning on his face. "I'm joking. I'm just joking," the woman interjected. "You're not the first person to take a moment to realize I'm Asian. It usually takes a while for men to meet my gaze." No, that's not what I meant," Vic protested, perhaps a bit too loudly, drawing the attention of several nearby people. She gestured for him to lower his voice, causing him to blush deeply. "I'm Dr. Vic Washington," he said, extending his hand. "I've been ALS business partner for quite some time. Yeah, I recognized you from the news, the woman replied, noticing Vic's grimace. I'm Lainey Brand, mostly a friend of Marilyn's. I didn't mean to offend you with my comment about the news. I suppose it's akin to people avoiding eye contact with me when they talk, she added. Fair point, Vic responded. How about we grab a drink? Then I'll converse with you while maintaining eye contact, and you can pretend I'm not a pitiful sap whose wife publicly embarrassed him. The woman found herself momentarily speechless, realizing she might have been as obvious as Vic when he was ogling her ample cleavage. Sure, she said, giving him a shy smile. For the next hour, Victor engaged in conversation with the woman until he realized he was dominating her attention. He apologized for any social awkwardness and expressed his intention to let her interact with other guests. She reassured him that she enjoyed their conversation, and they parted ways to mingle with others. Although Victor discreetly kept an eye on her for the remainder of the evening, Alan noticed Victor's behavior and joked about the strain it would cause on his neck from constantly looking over his shoulder. He suggested swapping places so Victor could have a clearer view without straining. Victor acknowledged his attempt at being subtle and cool, albeit unsuccessfully. Alan then provided some background information about Lainey, mentioning that she was 3 years younger than Victor, a longtime friend of Marilyn's, and worked as a reference librarian. Her previous marriage of 20 years ended due to infidelity on her husband's part, leaving her single for several years. Victor expressed surprise at how someone like Lainey could remain single for so long, questioning if she had overly high standards. Alan explained that while Lainey was highly regarded by their friend Marilyn, she was also selective about potential partners and wasn't eager to rush into another marriage unless it was with the right person. Understanding Alan's explanation, Victor simply responded with a thoughtful acknowledgement. Lainey and Vic didn't reconnect for the rest of the night, and she slipped away without Vic getting her number. He wasn't concerned, though, as he knew Marilyn had it. Vic waited 2 days before calling Marilyn. He didn't need to explain his reason for calling. You, sir, have remarkable self-control, Marilyn remarked, instead of starting with the usual niceties. Or you're just plain stupid. Vic was somewhat surprised. Marilyn seldom cursed and hardly ever dropped the F-bomb. I was trying to play it cool, not appear desperate, Victor explained. Did you really start with an Marilyn teased. Then why stress over looking cool to her? You ruined that with a simple 2-letter word. Or maybe it was the drooling. Victor was relieved Marilyn couldn't see how much he was blushing. So are you going to dial her number right away, or spend 2 days pondering the right and wrong approach? Marilyn quipped. You're quite the master debater. We all know that. Marilyn chuckled. Always the jokester, Mar, Vic replied. Can you give me her number now? Sure, but remember what I already told you about building a relationship rather than just expecting it to magically happen, Marilyn cautioned. The very next day, Victor extended an invitation to Lainey for dinner and a movie on the upcoming Friday. He chose a high-end Italian restaurant for dinner and allowed her to pick the movie. Are you trying to impress me with this restaurant? Lainey inquired. Did Marilyn mention I have Italian heritage? No, honestly, I wasn't aware, Victor replied. I simply didn't want to take an Asian woman to a Chinese, Japanese, or Korean restaurant. Well, I'm mostly Chinese, but it's from my other ancestry that I inherited these, she remarked, adjusting her posture to emphasize her chest. I know when you think of Chinese, you probably envision a gymnast, right? Double D isn't the typical stereotype. Victor blushed, uncertain why exactly. He supposed he wasn't accustomed to a woman with prominent assets speaking so openly about them. When he glanced back up, she was gazing directly at him with a smirk. Apologies if I come off as too direct. Didn't Marilyn give you a heads up? She asked. Not really. She usually ensures there are a few single women at gatherings, but keeps me in the dark about them, Victor admitted. Says I need to make an effort myself. Lainey burst into laughter. Victor soon learned that Lainey had no qualms about letting out a hearty laugh when amused. That's my girl, Lainey cheered. Vic discovered that Lainey didn't shy away from shedding tears when the moment struck, as evidenced by her emotional reaction to the ending of the romantic movie she chose. It turned out that her father's passing, much like the father of the female lead in the film, was the reason behind her tears. Victor wasn't aware of this until Lainey shared the information during a late-night dessert and coffee outing. After waiting for 2 days, Victor called Lainey to arrange another date, which she eagerly accepted for the upcoming weekend. Their fifth date culminated in both of them ending up in Victor's bed. About a month later, Marilyn had lunch with Lainey, and it didn't take long for her to inquire about the progress of Lainey's relationship with Victor. Why would his ex-wife let him go? He's attractive, well-built, a gentleman, and so much more, Lainey remarked, her cheeks flushing slightly. He even maintains eye contact with me, well, most of the time, except when I wear that red silk dress. I'd be astonished if any man didn't spend the whole night ogling my cleavage in that dress. Both women chuckled, realizing that Dr. Victor Washington might as well have claimed to be a married man at that point. In reality, it would be another 6 months before their wedding took place. Dr. Victor Washington's wedding announcement received only a passing mention in the local newspaper, not the extensive coverage it garnered nationwide. The media couldn't resist delving into the scandalous details of the marriage of the jilted husband. Damn them, George Burrell exclaimed to Arthur Clark over the phone, hurling a newspaper across the room. Every time one of them does something, there's another article about the jilted husband, and the press starts poking around again. That woman who cheated still works for you, right? Yeah, Clark replied, uncertain of the direction of the conversation. Get rid of her, Burrell whispered fiercely. Send her somewhere the press will never find her. 2 weeks later, a disgruntled Tracy Washington found herself running the firm's small office in Paducah, Kentucky. Ongoing media attention had rendered her unemployable elsewhere for a decent salary, while she fared financially in the divorce, with no family or social life to speak of. Her job was all she had left. Vic was taken by surprise to find a note from George Burrell placed prominently on his office desk when he arrived at work on a Monday morning. It was securely sealed, leaving Vic curious about its sender until he opened and perused its contents. Contained within was a rather unconventional invitation, if one could even classify a summons from Burrell as such. It proposed a meeting with the mafia boss in his office for lunch that very day at noon, with only the two of them present, as stated in the note. Although Vic had never encountered Burrell face-to-face, he was well aware, like many others, of the rumored association between Burrell and the demise of the man involved with his unfaithful partner. While pondering the reason behind the summons, Vic was certain he couldn't afford to disregard it. Following a thorough pat-down, Vic was guided into Burrell's office by a towering figure who seemed to be having a rough day. He was directed to a table on the side, already adorned with what seemed to be a lavish Italian lunch. Burrell introduced himself, shook Vic's hand, and escorted him to a seat. It's just us here, and this office undergoes bug sweeps daily, so we can speak openly, Burrell remarked. I owe you an apology of sorts. As you're probably aware, I'm the one who altered the course of your life. It was a monumental mistake, I can assure you. You were never meant to be affected. Heck, I didn't even know who you or your wife were. Mr. Burrell, if I may interject, Victor said, surprising Burrell with a brilliant smile. There's no need for apologies from you. In fact, you did me a great favor. Burrell stared at Victor as if he had sprouted a second head. Victor paused, took a sip of the Pappy Van Winkle 15-year-old bourbon Burrell had poured, and smiled once more. Ah, that's truly amazing, Victor remarked as Burrell stared at him intently, anticipating an explanation. Oh yeah, sorry. So, like I was saying, I honestly had no idea my unfaithful wife was cheating on me. You not only brought that to my attention, but then you did something I had only fantasized about when you had her lover taken care of. And the way you had his masculinity revoked was a brilliant touch. I hope your associate gave him a moment before administering the final shot. Spending 4.5 months in jail was a small price to pay for his demise, so thank you sincerely for that. Well, if you're at peace with it, then he'll stop feeling guilty. Cheers. The two men nodded at each other, downed their shots, and emphatically placed their glasses back on the table. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share,